firstly had the conception of making this technology, and secondly, the ability to actually physically make it. We've had to rethink the history of technology completely as a result of this single object.
An ancient ship sank, but its most important cargo survived. The Antikythera Mechanism preserved a hidden understanding of time, motion, and the heavens, sealed away for more than 2 millennia. Centuries later, Professor Tony Freeth uncovered what this device was truly designed to do, and why its creators may have been far more advanced than history ever admitted. The dive that changed history. Greek sponge divers worked the waters around Antikythera for generations before 1901. The tiny island, barely a rocky outcrop between Crete and the Peloponnese, offered little except dangerous diving conditions and the promise of valuable sponges growing 130 feet below the surface. Captain Dimitrios Kondos and his crew of 6 divers had stopped there only to shelter from a storm that spring. They decided to try their luck while waiting for calmer seas. The first diver to descend was Elias Stadiatis. He expected to find sponges. Instead, he surfaced frantically, babbling about corpses and horses scattered across the seafloor. Captain Kondos thought nitrogen had affected his mind and descended himself to verify.
He came up some minutes later, babbling about naked men and horses on the seabed.
What Kondos discovered was not death, but antiquity frozen in time. The bodies were bronze and marble statues, their features softened by 2 millennia of marine growth but still recognizably human. Pottery amphorae lay scattered among the sculptures, their painted decorations faintly visible beneath the algae. This was clearly a Roman vessel from the 1st century BCE, carrying Greek treasures when it foundered against Antikythera's cliffs. The salvage operation that followed would last until September, with the Greek government sending naval support. Among the recovered treasures, someone hauled up a mass of corroded metal about the size of a large dictionary. It was completely encased in limestone-like concretion formed by centuries of calcium deposits. The object had no artistic merit, no obvious value. The salvage team tossed it into a wooden crate with pottery fragments and other debris. For 8 months, it sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, while curators focused on the statues and jewelry. Then Athens's dry climate worked its chemistry. The concretion began splitting along natural stress lines, and archaeologist Valerios Staeus noticed something impossible in one of the cracks. A gear wheel with teeth barely a millimeter long, cut with mechanical precision that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. The impossible object. The gear teeth were smaller than grains of rice, yet each was identical to its neighbor. They meshed together with tolerances that modern watchmakers would recognize, forming a complex mechanical chain housed within what had once been a wooden box. To see such gears in 1902 was to confront a historical absurdity. According to every accepted timeline of technology, the 1st century BCE was an era of pottery wheels, simple pulleys, and rope mechanisms. The most complex devices were water clocks that used flowing liquid to mark time. Precision metalwork belonged to medieval Europe, appearing first in astronomical clocks built for cathedrals around 1300 CE. Manufacturing these gears would have required tools that the ancient world supposedly never possessed. Each tooth needed to be cut at exactly the same angle and depth. The craftsman would need a dividing engine to mark the gear blank into perfectly equal segments. They would need specialized files no thicker than a human hair. Most critically, they would need mathematical knowledge sophisticated enough to calculate gear ratios that could track celestial movements. The bronze alloy itself showed remarkable consistency, suggesting advanced metallurgical knowledge. As the museum staff carefully separated the fragments, the count reached 82 pieces. Some contained single gears, others showed multiple wheels fused together by corrosion. The largest fragment revealed at least 5 gears stacked on parallel axes. Inscriptions in ancient Greek covered many surfaces, though most were too corroded to read. The sheer complexity suggested this was not some experimental prototype, but a mature technology, refined through generations of development. The discovery challenged everything historians believed about the capabilities of the ancient world. Finding this mechanism in an ancient shipwreck was equivalent to excavating a laptop computer from a medieval castle. It was an artifact displaced in time, evidence of knowledge that history said shouldn't exist. For decades, it would sit in the Athens Museum, defying explanation. Traditional archaeologists approached it like they would a piece of pottery or sculpture, searching for artistic or religious significance. They found neither. The object remained an enigma until a mathematician with no archaeological training decided to count. The mathematician's eye. Professor Tony Freeth approached the Antikythera Mechanism with tools no archaeologist had thought to use: pure mathematics and set theory. Trained at Cambridge University, then refined at Bristol, Freeth had spent his career finding patterns in abstract number systems. Where others saw corroded bronze, he saw data waiting to be decoded. His background in set theory had taught him to recognize logical relationships in seemingly random collections. Later in life, he had become a filmmaker, learning to visualize complex ideas and communicate them clearly. These dual skills would prove essential. Freeth began with something deceptively simple. He counted teeth, not approximately, but exactly, pressing his eye close to each fragment and tallying every surviving tooth along the broken gear rims. He measured the distances between axle centers with calipers, calculated the radius of each wheel, and recorded every dimension in detailed charts. The numbers that emerged were peculiar: 19, 127, and 223. These were prime numbers, divisible only by 1 in themselves. For an ancient craftsman working with hand tools, creating a gear with 127 teeth represented a technical nightmare. The circle could not be easily halved or quartered during manufacture. Each tooth had to be individually calculated and cut. No one would choose such difficult numbers unless they had a specific mathematical purpose. Freeth recognized these numbers from astronomy. 19 years equals 235 lunar months in the Metonic cycle. The number 223 represents the months in a Saros cycle, used to predict eclipses. The implications were staggering. The mechanism's creator had deliberately chosen the most challenging numbers to fabricate because only those numbers could solve specific astronomical equations. This wasn't decorative or ceremonial, it was a calculating machine designed to process complex astronomical data. The ancient Greeks had built a computer, but this answer raised an even more profound question. If someone in antiquity invested such extraordinary effort into building a machine for astronomical calculations, they must have possessed theoretical knowledge far beyond what historians had imagined. They understood planetary motion, eclipse cycles, and lunar irregularities. They could translate that understanding into mechanical form. Seeing through time. 2,000 years of seawater had transformed the mechanism into something resembling solid rock. The bronze had fused with marine growth, creating a mass as hard as concrete and as brittle as chalk. Any attempt to separate the layers mechanically would shatter the only example of its kind. The gears, axles, and inscriptions were locked inside an armor of corrosion that seemed impenetrable. Traditional archaeological methods had reached their limit. Freeth made a decision that would have seemed like science fiction to earlier researchers. He arranged to transport an 8-ton X-ray computed tomography scanner from Britain to Athens. The machine, nicknamed Blade Runner, was originally designed to detect microscopic fractures inside jet engine turbine blades. It could generate X-rays powerful enough to penetrate dense metal while creating images with resolution measured in microns. The logistics were staggering. The scanner had to be partially disassembled, shipped across Europe, and reassembled inside the Athens Museum. When the machine powered up and began its work, the impossible happened. The X-rays sliced through the corroded mass like light through glass, creating digital cross-sections thinner than a human hair. Layer by layer, the mechanism revealed itself on computer screens. 30 interlocking gears appeared in 3 dimensions, their teeth still sharp despite the centuries. Some gears were the size of coins, others as large as a palm, all connected through a complex system of axles and bearings. The precision was breathtaking, but the gears were only part of the revelation. As Freeth magnified the images, text appeared everywhere. Thousands of tiny Greek characters, each only a few millimeters tall, covered the inner surfaces of the bronze plates. They filled the spaces between gears, ran along the edges of dials, and crowded every available surface. The mechanism had been speaking all along, waiting for technology advanced enough to hear its voice. What it said would transform the understanding of ancient science. The Hidden Manual. The inscriptions were not religious invocations or philosophical musings. They were operating instructions, written in the dry, technical language of an engineering manual. One section explained how to turn the side crank to advance the calendar. Another defined what each dial displayed. The text described astronomical phenomena with clinical precision using mathematical terms that would be familiar to modern astronomers. This was documentation for a sophisticated astronomical computer. The manual revealed the mechanism's true purpose. The front dial showed the positions of the Sun, Moon, and 5 visible planets against the zodiac. The back contained multiple subsidiary dials tracking different time cycles. One followed the Metonic cycle, reconciling solar and lunar calendars over 19 years. Another predicted eclipses using the Saros cycle of 223 lunar months. A third dial displayed the schedule of Pan-Hellenic Games, including the Olympics, synchronizing human celebrations with celestial rhythms. The text also exposed the mathematical sophistication behind the mechanism. It described how gear ratios had been calculated to match astronomical observations. The craftsmen understood that the Moon moves faster when closer to Earth and slower when farther away. They had built this variation into the mechanism using an ingenious pin-and-slot device that mechanically reproduced the Moon's elliptical orbit. This was Kepler's second law of planetary motion, demonstrated in bronze 16 centuries before Kepler was born. Between the gears, Freeth found what amounted to troubleshooting guides. If the moon dial showed an impossible date, the user should check the Metonic dial for confirmation. If the eclipse prediction seemed wrong, verify it against the Saros cycle. The ancient engineers had anticipated user error and built redundancy into their design. They had created not just a machine but a complete system for understanding celestial mechanics. Every detail showed careful thought, from the arrangement of text to maximize readability to the logical flow of information across different surfaces. The 19-year secret. The number 235 appeared everywhere Freeth looked. It wasn't written as a single gear with 235 teeth, which would have been mechanically impractical.
Was the remains of an upper dial with Price's 235 divisions representing the 19-year cycle.
Instead, the ancient engineers had distributed these teeth across multiple gears in a mathematical symphony. A gear with 47 teeth meshed with another carrying 5 sets of 47, creating exactly 235. The precision was deliberate. This number represented one of astronomy's most elegant relationships. 235 lunar months equal almost exactly 19 solar years, a pattern discovered by the Greek astronomer Meton in 432 BCE. The Metonic cycle solved a problem that plagued every ancient civilization. Lunar calendars, based on the Moon's 29.5-day cycle, drift out of alignment with solar years. After just 3 years, a lunar calendar falls behind by more than a month.
That made a problem for their calendar if they were going to have 12 months in every year.
Farmers couldn't plant crops by moon phases alone. Religious festivals tied to lunar months would drift through the seasons. The Greeks needed both calendars to work in harmony, and the Antikythera Mechanism provided the solution mechanically. Through careful analysis of the gear trains, Freeth's team discovered how the system worked.
A 63-toothed gear is part of the gearing for Venus and calculates a remarkable.
The main drive wheel, turned by a hand crank on the side of the box, advanced the solar calendar one day with each rotation. Through a series of precisely calculated gear ratios, this same motion advanced the lunar calendar by the correct fraction. After 19 complete turns of the year dial, representing 19 solar years, the lunar dial would complete exactly 235 months.
But the Greeks also knew that 19 solar years almost exactly equals 235 lunar months.
The calendars would realign, and the cycle would begin again. The mathematical elegance extended beyond simple ratios. The mechanism's designers had accounted for the fact that 235 lunar months is actually 6,939.6 days, not quite 6,940. They built in subtle corrections through additional gearing that would adjust the alignment over longer periods. This level of precision required not just observation but sophisticated mathematical modeling. The Greeks had effectively programmed astronomical algorithms into bronze, creating a mechanical computer that could project calendar dates forward or backward through time. A few turns of the crank could show the moon phase for any date decades in the past or future. The eclipse machine. A separate gear train drove what may have been the mechanism's most powerful feature, eclipse prediction. The number 223 appeared in the tooth count, corresponding to the Saros cycle discovered by Babylonian astronomers. After 223 lunar months, approximately 18 years and 11 days, the Sun, Earth, and Moon return to nearly the same relative positions. Eclipses repeat in patterns following this cycle. If a solar eclipse occurs today, another will occur 223 months from now, visible from a location about 120 degrees westward. The mechanism tracked this cycle through a spiral dial on its back face. The dial made 4 complete turns, with a sliding pointer indicating the current position within the 223-month sequence. Small inscriptions marked where eclipses would occur, noting whether they would be solar or lunar, and even indicating the expected hour of the day. The ancient operator could look decades ahead, identifying every eclipse that would be visible from the Greek world. This knowledge carried immense power in the ancient world, where eclipses were seen as messages from the gods. Consider what this meant for the mechanism's owner. They could walk into any Greek city and announce that the moon would disappear on a specific date 2 years hence. When the prediction proved accurate, their reputation as someone who understood divine will would be unassailable. Priests and astronomers who possessed this device held keys to cosmic knowledge that seemed supernatural to ordinary citizens. The mechanism transformed its operator from observer to prophet, able to reveal heaven's schedule with mechanical certainty. The eclipse predictor also included subtle refinements that showed deep astronomical understanding. The Greeks knew that not all eclipses in a Saros cycle were visible from the same location. The mechanism included markings indicating eclipse magnitude and whether an eclipse would occur during daylight or night. Some historians believe additional lost gearing may have predicted eclipse paths across Earth's surface. The device compressed centuries of astronomical observation into a palm-sized bronze calculator. The Moon's hidden dance. The most ingenious feature of the mechanism was almost invisible, a pin sliding in a slot that made the moon's indicator speed up and slow down across the dial. This tiny mechanical detail embodied one of antiquity's greatest astronomical discoveries. Hipparchus, working in the 2nd century BCE, had observed that the moon doesn't orbit Earth at a constant speed. It moves faster when closer to Earth at perigee and slower when farther away at apogee. This variation, called the lunar anomaly, affects eclipse timing and moon phases. The mechanism's builders translated this cosmic dance into bronze through geometric genius. They mounted one gear on a slightly offset axis, creating an eccentric rotation. A pin attached to this gear rode in a slot cut into another wheel. As the gears turned, the pin would slide along the slot, sometimes closer to the center, sometimes farther away. This varying radius caused the moon indicator to accelerate and decelerate, matching the actual lunar motion with startling accuracy. Modern analysis shows the mechanism reproduces the moon's varying speed to within 1 part in several hundred. This mechanical solution demonstrated the same principle Johannes Kepler would describe mathematically in 1609. Celestial bodies sweep out equal areas in equal times. The Greeks had built Kepler's law into a machine 16 centuries before Kepler formulated it. They understood orbital mechanics not through equations but through the language of gears and geometry. The mechanism also displayed the moon's phases through an ingenious spherical indicator. A small ball, painted half white and half black, rotated to show the illuminated portion of the lunar surface. The gearing ensured this indicator stayed synchronized with the moon's actual phase, accounting for the complex relationship between the moon's position relative to both Earth and the Sun. Observers could see at a glance whether the moon would be waxing or waning on any given date. The planetary ballet. The front face of the mechanism displayed the cosmos as the Greeks understood it. 7 concentric rings showed the paths of celestial bodies around Earth, which they believed occupied the center. The Sun and Moon had their own rings, while the 5 visible planets shared orbital tracks. Each celestial body had its own pointer, driven by separate gear trains calculated to match observed planetary periods. Mercury completed its circuit in 88 days, Venus in 224 days, and Mars in 687 days. The true sophistication appeared in how the mechanism handled retrograde motion. Planets don't move steadily across the sky but occasionally appear to stop, reverse direction, and then resume forward motion. This retrograde movement baffled ancient astronomers until they developed complex geometric models to explain it. The mechanism's builders had somehow translated these abstract mathematical theories into mechanical reality. Through combinations of gears rotating at different speeds, they made planetary pointers trace loops that matched actual observations. Recent reconstructions suggest the mechanism used pin and slot mechanisms similar to the lunar anomaly device to create these retrograde loops. As inner gears turned, pins would trace epitrochoid curves, making the planetary pointers weave back and forth along their tracks. The mathematical complexity required to calculate these gear ratios without modern tools defies comprehension. The builders had effectively programmed the dance of the planets into bronze, creating a mechanical planetarium that could display the night sky for any date. The completed mechanism presented the universe as a clockwork system, predictable and precise. This vision wouldn't become dominant in Western thought until Isaac Newton 2,000 years later. Yet here it was, manufactured in bronze by ancient hands, proof that someone had grasped the mechanical nature of celestial motion when Rome was still a republic and Northern Europe belonged to Iron Age tribes. The Olympic connection. The back face of the mechanism contained a dial that had nothing to do with astronomy, yet everything to do with Greek civilization. Alongside the eclipse predictor and calendar displays sat a 4-year spiral tracking the schedule of Pan-Hellenic Games. The Olympics, held at Olympia, appeared first, then came the Pythian Games at Delphi, the Nemean Games near Argos, and the Isthmian Games at Corinth. Each festival had its designated position on the dial, mechanically synchronized with the solar calendar. This wasn't merely a convenience feature. The Greeks structured their entire social calendar around these athletic and religious celebrations. Treaties specified truces during Olympic years. Commercial contracts referenced payments due after the next Isthmian Games. Politicians timed announcements to coincide with these gatherings when Greece's scattered city-states would send representatives. The mechanism united two seemingly separate worlds, the mathematical precision of celestial mechanics and the human rhythms of cultural celebration. The game's dial revealed something profound about how the Greeks viewed time itself. They didn't separate sacred from scientific, human from cosmic. The same bronze gears that tracked the moon's elliptical orbit also counted down to the next wrestling match at Nemea. The mechanism suggested that athletic competitions, religious festivals, and planetary movements were all part of a single harmonious system. The universe operated on schedule, and human activities could be synchronized with that cosmic clockwork. The inscriptions around the game's dial included additional details that showed careful thought about practical use. Small markings indicated which games occurred in which years of the cycle. The Isthmian and Nemean Games happened every 2 years, while the Olympic and Pythian Games occurred every 4. The mechanism's operator could determine not just when the next games would occur, but which specific competitions would overlap. This information would be invaluable for merchants planning trade expeditions, athletes preparing for competition, or pilgrims organizing religious journeys. The machine lives again. The UCL Antikythera research team was formed in 2000 with an ambitious goal: to rebuild the ancient computer using only evidence from the surviving fragments. The team brought together physicists who understood mechanical forces, astronomers who could verify celestial calculations, historians who could interpret ancient Greek inscriptions, and engineers who could translate theoretical designs into working metal. Tony Freeth served as the mathematical backbone, ensuring every gear ratio matched both physical evidence and astronomical reality. They began by creating a complete digital model, mapping every surviving gear tooth, every axle hole, every inscribed character. The X-ray tomography data provided three-dimensional coordinates accurate to fractions of a millimeter. Computer simulations allowed them to test different arrangements, watching virtual gears mesh and turn. When a configuration failed to produce correct astronomical outputs, they adjusted and tried again. Hundreds of iterations refined their understanding of how the original mechanism must have operated. The decision to build a physical replica raised new challenges. Modern machine tools could cut gears with perfect precision, but the ancient Greeks worked with hand files and bronze chisels. The team chose to use traditional techniques wherever possible, cutting gears manually, filing teeth individually, and polishing surfaces with progressively finer abrasives. they discovered that achieving smooth operation required tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Too tight and the friction would lock the mechanism. Too loose and the gears would skip teeth. The moment of testing arrived in 2008. The reconstructed mechanism, gleaming bronze like its ancient predecessor, sat complete. Team members gathered as Freeth grasped the side crank, the same type of square-socketed key the original owner would have turned. The first rotation produced resistance as dozens of gears engaged simultaneously. Then came a soft clicking sound as teeth meshed and released in sequence. The moon pointer began its irregular dance. The planetary indicators traced their paths. Calendar dials advanced in perfect synchronization. After 2,000 years, the cosmos moved again in bronze. The mechanism operated with a smoothness that surprised even its rebuilders. Despite the complexity of multiple gear trains running simultaneously, the resistance remained constant. The ancient engineers had mastered concepts like gear tooth profile and bearing load distribution that wouldn't be formally described until the Industrial Revolution. Their intuitive understanding of mechanical efficiency matched or exceeded the finest clockwork of 18th century Europe. The vanished legacy. The perfection of the Antikythera mechanism raised a troubling paradox. If the ancient Greeks could build such sophisticated devices, why did the technology disappear completely? No similar mechanisms appear in the archaeological record for the next 1,500 years. Medieval European clockmakers had to rediscover principles of gearing from scratch. Islamic astronomers created magnificent astrolabes, but nothing approaching this mechanical complexity. The mechanism stands alone, without predecessors or successors, like finding a single smartphone in an archaeological dig. Roman author Cicero provides tantalizing hints that such devices weren't unique. Writing in the 1st century BCE, he described seeing two machines built by Archimedes that displayed the movements of celestial bodies. One was solid, likely a painted sphere, but the other was mechanical, showing the moon overtaking the sun by as many revolutions as it does in the heavens. This description matches the Antikythera mechanism's capabilities precisely. Cicero treated these devices as impressive but not impossible, suggesting they were recognized technology among educated Romans. The loss of this knowledge wasn't gradual but catastrophic. The Library of Alexandria burned multiple times between 48 BCE and 391 CE, taking with it countless technical manuscripts. The Lyceum in Athens, where Aristotle's followers studied mechanics and astronomy, was destroyed in 86 BCE. Wars, conquests, and religious upheavals shattered the chains of master-to-apprentice knowledge that preserved technical skills. Within a few generations, the ability to create precision gearing was gone. Humanity wouldn't rediscover these principles until medieval monks needed accurate timekeeping for prayers. The mechanism might represent not the beginning but the end of a technological tradition. Perhaps it was built by one of the last workshops that retained this ancient knowledge, a final masterpiece before the skills vanished. The bronze gears might be a tombstone marking the death of Greek mechanical science.
Anything from ancient Greece simply shouldn't have gear wheels. These were precision gears, with teeth about 1 millimeter long.
Preserved by chance when the ship carrying it to Rome foundered off Antikythera. The warning from the deep. Before his death, Tony Freeth reflected on what the Antikythera mechanism meant for understanding human progress. His final interviews carried a somber message that contradicted everything modern society believes about technological advancement. Progress, he argued, isn't inevitable. The mechanism proved that human knowledge moves in cycles, reaching peaks of sophistication before collapsing into darkness. What seems like permanent advancement can vanish in a single generation. Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction author and futurist behind 2001: A Space Odyssey, once calculated that if the Greeks had continued developing technology at the rate implied by the Antikythera mechanism, they would have reached the moon within 3 centuries. Instead, that knowledge vanished so completely that medieval scholars encountering descriptions of ancient mechanical marvels dismissed them as pure fantasy. The mechanism confronts us with an uncomfortable truth. Our own technological civilization remains just as fragile. The Mediterranean seafloor holds thousands of ancient shipwrecks, most lying in waters too deep for conventional diving. Each year, improving underwater technology makes new sites accessible. Statistical probability suggests more mechanisms exist, waiting in the darkness. If one ship carried such a device, others likely did too. But salt water and time are unforgiving. Bronze corrodes, wood dissolves, and knowledge turns to sediment on the ocean floor. Freeth's final confession was that the mechanism humbles modern arrogance.
The history of technology to a much earlier time. It is completely astonishing that the ancient Greeks.
We assume our knowledge is permanent, backed up in databases, and preserved in institutions. But the Greeks probably felt the same confidence. They had schools, libraries, and workshops passing skills through generations. None of it prevented the complete loss of their mechanical knowledge. The Antikythera Mechanism reminds us that civilization is fragile, that what we know today could become myth tomorrow, leaving future archaeologists to wonder how we achieved the impossible. Don't miss the videos on screen now. They're just as interesting. Catch you in the next one.